All right, guys. Today we have a special interview with Todd Frommeyer. He is running for District 4 County Commission, which again is my seat, so he is asking for my vote here. He's also asking for AC's vote, who's not here because he's too busy to do what he wanted to do when we volunteered to do this. So Todd is here, and I'm going to let Todd start off and kind of give his brief history and introduction, kind of what got him into the decision to run for it. So Todd, if you want to go ahead.
Well, we didn't talk in advance, and I just wonder if you want me to ramble for a while, or if you're going to cut me off on these questions.
I will interject as needed. We intentionally don't structure a lot because it's kind of the point.
Okay.
But yeah, just however you want to do it. I have a couple of specific questions just because, as I mentioned to you when we were setting up the date and time, is that I also had Kyle Ward here, your opponent.
Right.
And I had a couple questions that I asked him, and I want to ask similar questions to you to see how you feel about the same kind of things.
Okay.
But other than that, it's a free ad for you at this point.
Okay. And the only reason I ask even is just because I've been asked this question a lot of times, and sometimes it's give me 1 minute version, and then I can go on for 27 minutes. So I'll try and make it.
We'll go with the 6.5 minute version. How's that?
Yeah. Okay. So running for District 4 County Commission, I'm a 20-year military veteran and retired lawyer. I say retired lawyer usually just because I'm not licensed in the state of Tennessee, and I'm not planning on practicing here. I've practiced elsewhere. But so for all intents and purposes, I'm retired. My wife's an OBGYN down at Fort Sanders. I've got an 11-year-old stepdaughter that's going to be starting West Valley Middle School. And my son's a rising sophomore at UT, although he's currently quarantining with his mom in Virginia.
Gotcha. So to ask the question, Max is going to ask you in 2 seconds. What branch?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was going to get to that because I'm going to give you the slightly longer version of my background. I'm from Kentucky originally. I went into the Navy in 1986. I was a Russian linguist, so I was in the Navy for about 8 years, did the language school in Monterey, and then I went to Turkey for a year. I was in Spain for a little bit, and then I got to work with the On-Site Inspection Agency, which is now known as the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So I was on arms control inspection teams as a Russian interpreter. When the Russians would come over and visit us here at the Nevada test site or at the various military bases for START and INF treaty stuff, we would accompany them. And then likewise, when we would go over and do the inspections in Russia, I would be on those teams. Okay. I did a lot out at the Nevada test site out near Area 51.
I always have to ask that because I was in the Department of the Navy, but I was in the men's Department of the Navy, which we call the Marine Corps.
All right. Well, I follow the Navy with the Air Force, so I still don't get quite to the Marines. So I did that for about 8 years. Got out, used the GI Bill to go to law school. And I really didn't have any intention of going back in the military. It was a good experience, but I thought I was ready to move on. I did my 3 years of law school. I did an extra year at the University of Houston Law Center where I concentrated on international economic law, and I thought that's really what I wanted to do. But my first job out of law school was in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Office of Hearings and Appeals for the Social Security Administration, which was fine. It was a good job, but I missed some of the structure, the family aspect of the military. So I applied to the Air Force and got in as a member of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, which is JAG, the military lawyer, if you're familiar. Like the show, JAG, or like A Few Good Men, except, like I say, I never...
That's all realistic, though.
I didn't fly fighter planes, and I was not cross-examining Jack Nicholson. So did that for about 12 years. Was stationed in Missouri, Florida, California. I got to go to Japan. I was deployed to Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base, and then I was in Baghdad for about 6 months. The Air Force deployments were not as long as the Army and the Marines, I know. So
I hear the food's better too.
The food is
well, I tell you
excellent.
what, when I was in Iraq, it was very near the drawdown, and they had. So I was within the walls there of all the bases that they had in I worked in one of Saddam's palaces at a computer, so I wasn't really out in danger much, but the chow halls were really great up until about so I got there in May, and then September they started the transition to drawing down, and one of the first things was the quality of the chow went way down. We had steaks.
Well, they want you to want to go home, I guess.
And chefs putting together whatever we wanted to do before September, and then after September, it was more of a cafeteria style. But
see how I always rate the military, like the Navy on ship in the Navy, like when I was on the Bill of Wood, best food you could find, and then when you're over on land, you always look for the nearest Air Force base because you usually have the most amenities and the best looking women. Marine Corps does not have a lot of good looking women.
Yeah, no, I mean I've been in both, and I've been at both bases. And the Air Force definitely has the extras that the Navy didn't. It's just that the Navy had the location. They were usually on the beach.
Right.
Yes.
The Air Force, you're in.
I'll tell you what, the prettiest beach I've ever been in my entire life was technically Navy but it was a Marine training beach in Hawaii. And so it's closed to the public, and my brother was in the Navy at the time, so we got to. I don't know if I was technically pretending to be him or not to go in there, but it's open to the public on the weekends. But it was this 20-mile stretch of the most gorgeous beach ever with nobody on it.
Camp Pendleton have a little place like that where you could rent. They had these little trailers on the beach, and it was $35 a day, and so on the weekend you could rent them, and you just had this private beach just for military people or friends of military people. So it's nice. You have some good amenities in the military.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so JAG stuff.
Right. So I did.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the best. I'm going to transition out of the military and go back to it. But so after the military, I retired at 20 because I was tired of deploying. Tired of getting away from home, and I really wanted to work for the agency that Elizabeth Warren created. I was a big fan, and I know you guys know I'm a Democrat. I'm running as the Democrat here.
Yeah.
And so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was starting to staff up just around the time that I retired, so I went to work there. I was in the Consumer Response Division where consumers would, submit their complaints about the banks or the credit cards, debt collectors and what have you, and so we would help those. And so, that job, and then when I was in the military, I was also the military equivalent of a public defender in the Air Force. It's called Area Defense Council. And so there I was able to be on the side of the airmen, and sometimes it was the full force of the Air Force coming down on them, and I really enjoyed being able to, defend. I mean, sometimes it's a court-martial, and sometimes they did something bad, but a lot of times it's just young kids doing stupid stuff, and I was happy to be on their side. And so those two jobs, working at the CFPB and then the public defender job that I had, are kind of what I'm trying to bring that to what I'm going to do as the county commissioner. Right? If I'm so fortunate as to win on August 6th, I want to stand up for the little guy. I think there are enough people on the commission who are there for the people with money or the business interests, and I'm hoping to be able to be something a little different up there.
Okay.
So
business interests or small business interests?
Well, I know you guys, or you, Seth, do own a business, because I listened to a couple of podcasts just to make sure that I wasn't coming in blind here. I think business in general, I don't, I think it's a misconception that Democrats hate business. I don't think that's the case. I think our focus is on fairness and justice, and so business, I think, encompasses all of it. But when the main thing that I am very critical of in the system and what I see in the commission is development specifically. If you look at the financial disclosures for the commissioners, candidates who are running for commission, they get a lot of their money from developers, and that does include my opponent. So I've tried to take a little bit of a different spin on that, and I'm not taking that kind of donation. And so I think money is a big part of the problem in politics in general, and also in Knox County, because if you look at the $1,000 checks that a lot of the candidates take, it's from people who have an interest in what the commission might be ruling on. Specifically, one of the big things the commission does is, sorry about that.
You're fine. No, you're I've been messing with it the whole time.
Land use, redevelopment. The rezoning stuff comes up there, and right now you have a 10-1 Republican-Democrat split on the commission, with a lot of people who have gotten a lot of money from developers, and I think developers give money to those candidates because for favorable view of their ideas,
their project they want to work on, and
for sure.
And so again, when I'm saying I'm looking out for the little guy, I've been going to the commission meetings since I got into this campaign, and I see a lot of the neighbors near the developments that are going to be, proposed, and they get their hearing at the commission, and the developer gets his or her hearing, and then the commission almost always just says, okay, well, we're going to rezone, and you guys work it out. And I don't think there's enough balance in that. So
okay, excellent. Okay, so one of the things we talk about all the time, one of the things we talked about with Kyle when he was here, is we suck at civics. And so one of the things, as I was researching you, as I was researching Kyle, as I was talking to Miss Gina about as well, is how does it, like the actual kind of like the behind the scenes of like when you decided to do this. Yeah. There's the petition you have to get enough signatures on so that you can get 25. On the ballot. 25 signatures?
Yes.
Okay.
With voters in my district, I had
That's it?
That's it. 25 for county commission. Now there are more if you go up to a higher level. And I haven't looked into it, but like state rep or state senate, or if you want to be senator, it might be like 2250. And
so do you have a staff that's helping you go through? Because that's one of the things is like I've kind of half looked at doing the job you're running for, and just as a thought experiment, if nothing else.
I wouldn't vote for you.
I wouldn't vote for me either, but that's not the point. Are
you the raging libertarian?
I am the raging libertarian.
Right, okay.
He is, but I've moved as time gone from very Republican to, like, I always talk about that there being access of you have far right Republican, far left Democrat, and then where does libertarian fall in? And I've made a separate scale of going north for libertarian, and then liberal far south. And so I'm kind of moving towards that north, somewhat in between. I'm not full libertarian that says we don't need anything.
Don't worry if you're listening. His visual doesn't help you understand what he's talking about.
Is AC the one who has decided that Trump needs to go?
AC is a very, very negative.
Max is the only one that's. I think everybody else is. I'm obviously not. Sam's not a big Trump fan. AC is definitely not a Trump fan. But I think Max is the only one that has any love for Trump.
But it's kind of the.
I just heard that on one of your podcasts. You mentioned.
Well, it's just being, Biden or Trump. Who do you pick? And for me, the better lunatic is Trump. And so it's sad, and we've talked about this a lot in politics, is we've gone so far away from who we want to win to who we don't want to win.
Right.
And so bringing in that third party person and is moved me more closer to Jorgensen than either of the other two. And if I had to pick right now, I'd say Jorgensen, but
the problem with that
is if you do
like
that,
everybody else doesn't know much about her.
Well, if you do that, then you are giving up a vote, because is a third party going to actually win? So then you're like, okay, well, let me vote. And it's sad that we are in a state where people vote for who they do not want versus who they want.
Right. They vote for to be against the other, not for who the for is. I'm gonna bring it back to track though, real quick.
Yeah, I can go off.
Yeah, and that we got a whole other episode to do that in here in a minute. But so one of the big things I talk about with both Gina and Kyle is what's going on with the schools right now. Mm-hmm. And again, understanding that we're not great at civics. What, as your understanding is, what does county commission actually have impact on for Knox County School District?
Okay, well, the school's budget is 60% plus of the overall budget. The commission approves the budget. That's one of the powers, and we can go off on a tangent because the commission did just approve with one small amendment the mayor's budget. I think it was this past Wednesday. Right. And so
I did see there was some. There's some police bonus and
the big
school,
blue wall.
Was. I didn't get a lot of time to read deeper into it, but I did see some stuff about that. It might have been through your Facebook page. It might have been Virginia's. Since I started, I don't have a lot of. Anyway, not important. Yeah, I'll tell that story later. Well, but so anyway, schools and what you can help.
Right. Well, so to my mind, the commission's power with regard to the school budget is one, just as a commissioner, you need to work with everybody. And as I've seen the process unfold, the school has different incomes, revenue streams that they know are dedicated to the schools. Some of it comes to the states or the feds,
Right.
and so they put together the way it worked this year. They put together their budget, and they were about $4 million less than what they were trying to do. And I think as a commissioner, I would be an advocate for making sure that the school's budget is fully topped up. I think that even in a bad time like we've got now with sales tax revenues down,
Right.
I think schools ought to be the number one priority. And so as you work one, I know that I don't see it. I go to the commission meetings and I see what happens at the meetings, and I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I get a sense, but you really don't know. And
Right.
so I think that's part of the commissioner's job, is to work behind the scenes to advocate for the priorities that the individual commissioner might look for. And so
Okay.
schools would be one. But then the other thing is, and I'm a big proponent of this, because I don't think the current commission really does a good job of oversight of the mayor. And so the mayor came out with his budget, and with this exception of the bonus for the officers,
Mhm.
the sheriff's officers, they just basically rubber stamped the mayor's budget. And I think the Knox County Charter says, and it's in Section 2 of the charter, and I forget, 2.01 maybe, that the commission has the power to both adopt and amend the budget.
Right.
Now, obviously, you want that to be in conjunction with the folks at the mayor's office. Chris
Right.
Caldwell's the finance director, to make sure that you're not just throwing them totally off.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if the commission, I would hope, say, look, a priority for us is not just a bonus for the police officers, but for the teachers, and the big cuts in the schools, we ought to be addressing that. And so the way you do that, I think, as a commissioner, from my perspective, is that you exercise your power.
To
You
amend that
exercise a
budget.
little
Right.
bit of oversight over the Jacobs administration and make that happen.
So the question I have is so Knox County Schools says, you got to approve their budget. Do they break down what? It's not like, oh, we need $40 million. I don't even know what is the budget of Knox County Schools.
It's like half a
Right.
half
So
a billion.
the Knox
500
County overall budget is in the 830 to 40 range in the millions, and then 60% of that, it's 540 or something
540
like
is
that
million.
for the
So
schools.
when the school says we need 540 million, do they state why they need 540 million?
Yes, they
It's-
have a
it's like a
very
25
specific
page,
budget where
yeah, it's a big-
yeah,
it's a
very-
big-
So can you go through that and say, no, Hall's football is not going to get $3 million this year? Like, is it broken down?
I don't think
where-
it's that detailed. It'd be
Well,
it'd be
that's what I'm-
athletics.
what-
I don't know.
How
He knows
is
the
it
answer.
broken down?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the school board, the school administration has a lot of autonomy, and this is our budget. They're given guidelines, say here's what the revenue is, here's how much you can have. Now divide it up how you want. So, for instance, this budget, since they had to cut $4 million, they were going to get rid of about 20 positions in administrative positions. They cut $1 million from materials and supplies. They did so all of the full-time employees had to take a furlough to save some money. So they had a lot of specific cuts, and they look at the amount and said, here's what we need, and okay, here's where we've got to cut.
Right.
And
So I'm sorry to
Yeah, go
interrupt,
ahead.
but let me because you've said it a couple times here that it's 60% of it's 60% of the county's total budget,
yes.
give or take. Is that an agreed upon number going in, or is that just it averages out that way? Like, I mean, in the sense of if Knox County collects $1 billion, the schools get $600 million, or is it just over the years it's averaged out? It's not
I'm going to just say I'm not exactly sure. I think
Okay.
that's
But
just
do you
how
understand the
it's-
question,
Yeah,
at
it's
least? Okay.
just, I mean, there, like I said, I think there's some dedicated streams of revenue that come to the schools. So they get state money and they get federal money. And I think this time the county had to pop in an extra $4 million. So there are certain parts of the revenue streams that are dedicated to the schools, and they know we've got this much money.
Okay.
And this time, I think Mayor Jacobs in his video announcement said, and we had to give an extra $4 million to the schools to get to that number, which was still $4.4 million less
Short
than what they would have wanted. But, based
Right.
on last year, and then they had some step raises
Right,
for
to project.
teachers and
Right.
inflation and other things that they need. They They
Okay,
put that together.
so to put you at least a little bit on the fire on it, are our kids going back in August or not?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I don't
Like
know.
in the
I don't have
flesh?
any special insight.
Right.
But
I think even if it's not in the power of the position, I think that at least for the voters' sake, how you see the future going is important to me.
there
Does that
will at
make
least
sense?
be some in person. What happens in between now and say August 10th
Right.
could have a big
Right.
impact on that fact. But I think
But by August 10th, you'll be working. So.
September 1st, if I win,
Okay.
would be September
But
1st.
you'll have been elected. Okay.
Yeah, you've been elected by that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's hoping. But so the idea is they've got 3 or so plans that they're looking at.
Yeah.
One of them is like entirely online. They're not ready for the entirely online. I don't think that they can do that. They'll opt for one of the other two. I think there's a most parents want the kids to be in school in some way, and then that's just make it safe. And then
If it's online, you're gonna have a bunch of murders by mothers in Knox County.
well, I did the online schooling from spring break. My wife's a doctor. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I've got my mom and my mother-in-law and 6 dogs, and so I did all of that with my stepdaughter, and it's terrible. I mean,
It is
teachers
awful.
deserve way more pay than they're getting, and if we didn't realize that
Well,
before, surely we do
I
now.
will pay teachers more. My brother's a teacher. My sister-in-law, his wife's a teacher. I love teachers. I will pay them whatever they want if they stop sending fundraising things home. Whatever that costs.
I would
me.
be nice. I mean, that is I agree with you on that one. So moving forward is where do you see yourself as far as in politics? Is this just kind of a your stay-at-home dad? Your stepdaughter said is in middle school.
She'll be starting 6th grade.
She'll be starting 6th grade. So it's getting to that point where the stay-at-home part of your dad duties aren't as involved. So you have the time. Is this something to do? Is this something for a way for you to give back in the community in the time you have, or is this step one on a path further into politics?
Yeah, I'm going to be 55, so I don't think that I'm starting my run to the presidency or anything like that.
You've got 20 years to get there. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you
Well,
do.
hopefully when Joe Biden wins in November, he's a bridge to the younger generation, and we hand it off to them. But no, so okay. I'm throwing that red meat out there for you.
Just stick around for the regular show.
All right. So, no, I mean, we go back to the reason I'm in this race. So, I was in the military. I did a lot of absentee voting because I traveled around a lot. I finally have settled down here in Knoxville. I go to the booth, and I see in Knox County that you've got Republicans running unopposed in the general election. I see, and then last summer, because I think this is a pretty consequential election in 2020, I decided I need to do something more than just vote next year. So I started looking around, and I realized, talking to people, that the county commission seat in District 4 was going to be a Republican unopposed if I didn't run. There was one other guy who was looking at it, and he decided not to go. I talked to my wife, and she's super supportive in everything I want to do. I said, I really want to make sure that voters have a choice. Next August, there ought to at least be another name on that line.
Right. I mean, we've made the argument a number of times that for a lot of Knox County positions, it's the primary for the Republicans that is really the election for that seat.
Yes.
And I agree with that, and I fully agree with that logic. So that brings me very quickly to the next question is, I mean, obviously you identify yourself as a Democrat, and that's great. How does that work structurally as far as, is there I'm assuming there's an office. They have a. I mean,
there is a Knox County Democratic Party.
Right. That's what I'm asking. Yeah. And so is how's the process work for you getting? Are you approved by them as far as you're allowed to wear our badge of the capital D?
I was so when I was doing this last summer, I actually talked to the head of the Knox County Democratic Party, LaKenya Middlebrook, who just got appointed to the park down in Knoxville. If you we want to talk about that. That's an interesting side story. But so I talked to them, and I was checking to see, because I didn't want to primary another Democrat. If there was someone else running, I just wanted to make sure there was a name on the line.
Okay.
And there wasn't. So then I started looking a little more in detail. My wife said she wasn't going to support me just getting my name on the line and leaving it at that. She said, you have to try and win. So
she's like, I'm not voting for you unless you come up with something.
Yeah. So no, I mean, it's I don't know how the Republicans work, and maybe there are a lot of people clamoring to run. I mean, there were a couple of primaries and a couple of the commission things, and
right.
Yeah,
so but that's a curiosity because I mean, the bigger one that jumped out to me was when I was looking into Gina for that interview. Is that like her website? To me, looks like you take the all the marketing from Donald Trump, like all the red and white. Like it literally looks like it was just like a template that was picked up and replaced with Gina info. And I'm curious how the parties locally work in that sense. I'm not, there's got to be, I would assume there's some sort of vetting by them to let you at least run as a Democrat. Because one of the things we talk about a lot is, so you had Bernie run it as a Democrat,
Yes.
but he is an independent in his home state. But, we've got Eddie Manis right now, who as
Yes.
a mayor, it is a non-party affiliated race, I guess, is the way the Knox City mayor works. But historically speaking, a lot of people look at him more of a Democrat in Knoxville than a Republican. But he's running on the Republican ticket for that seat against Gina, and so that brought the question to me, and I asked Kyle the question. That's why I'm asking you the same question: is how does the Democratic Party work as far as letting you call yourself a Democrat? Because I feel like. I'm just curious if you're just allowed to assign yourself the title and they have to deal with it, or they have some sort of like, okay, we agree, you follow the set of principles, at least some of the principles that we call ourselves as Democrats.
I think, at the end of the day, I think the same process that applied for in the Eddie Manis situation. Was it Eddie Manis? They were the Tennessee GOP wanted to try and say he's not a Republican and he couldn't run, and then he ended up winning that appeal. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't keep up with, but I assume there might be something similar for the statewide Democratic Party, but by the same token, Knox County is traditionally Republican, and I think if someone's willing to say I'm a Democrat and I'm going to run, and especially in a seat where there's not going to be one,
well, that's what
I don't. So what you're saying is you're really Republican, but
that's
you're
what
running as a Democrat.
That was not. I wasn't going to put it as a joke, but that was what I was getting ready to say. Right. So if you wanted to be like Eddie Manis, for example, but Virginia Couch was running, but that's beside the point. Assuming Virginia Couch wasn't running, and it was Gina versus nobody, the logic would say that if the Democratic Party doesn't care and I can run as a Democrat even though they're not going to sign off on it, then it kind of undermines the process of the party system, which I'm okay with. But you get what I'm saying, though, as far as like
Well, I'm
there's
all
not
about that though.
But there's not vetting at the beginning, I think, is the question you're asking.
Okay.
But if I had tried to be a Manchurian candidate and I was really a Republican, just trying to ruin the whole thing, the process of the campaign would have shown me, because I have had to answer a lot of questionnaires and do things like this in forums and where I had to answer, and if I was not giving
if you're giving your honest answer, it's not going to fit the known party line.
But just the 20 years in the military, that for me, for most of the military people I know, they're not Democrat. So just being 20 years in the military for me is it kind of makes my mind wobble, my mind wobble.
Yeah,
my mind wobble of how can you be a Democrat because all Democrats are anti-military? I know that's not true, but that is a majority of people think that
Democrats
if you are Democrats,
that are anti-military.
We have a show where you guys can argue about stupid stuff.
But I think that is kind of a
right. That is the assumption. If you were in the military, you would lean right.
Yes.
And I just happen to have not been that.
Probably because you were a smarter military person with a law degree.
Hey, don't give AC ammo for later.
At least in the JAG Corps, it's much more liberal than the military in general. So I didn't have to hide the fact that I was liberal and have it held against me. And since I wasn't trying to really climb the ranks up to colonel and general, and I was quite happy to get out at 20 at major, it didn't really matter.
And he wanted to save all the politic playing for now instead of then.
Exactly.
But okay, so the last one on my list of this, as far as like important things that I wanted to touch on, kind of talked about it a little bit. So
just say it. Just say it.
Like I said, it's the I suck at physics. We suck at civics, and I'm trying to better understand the process. Mm-hmm. So So again, you made the decision. You're going to run. You got your 25 signatures, and your wife said you had to try. And so you go out and you start. I've started seeing your signs around town, which is fantastic. And it's like, hey, I get to talk to that guy. It's really it makes this whole political process more fun for me doing this. But and so and all the paperwork and stuff going into it. Just kind of walk me through a little bit of that, because like I said, there has been a curiosity for me on whether this is something that may be in my future. And so, is there? Do you go down to the city county building and you sit down and fill out a stack of paperwork, and then you're now a candidate and you just got to go and get your votes? Or
so if you're going to pull the petition to run, you actually have to go to the election commission, because it's not something you can download off the internet. You have to get it so that they know, okay, this person has pulled a petition and is at least thinking about running. Now, if you don't turn the petition in with the 25 signatures in time, then they just don't put you on the ballot. And the recommendation is get way more than 25, because a lot of people will sign and maybe they're not a registered voter or they're not in your district, something like that. So I got about 50 signatures just to make sure I get on the ballot. And then you've got like a week after you qualify, you've got a week to withdraw, because sometimes people get their petition and drop it in. They see, hey, well, there's 3 people in this primary. I really don't want a primary, and I'm going to drop. Right. So that's the first step. After that, it's campaigning as you probably know it, and there's a lot of there's one other thing. I had to do a certification from the state about my candidacy, but they sent it to me in the mail. I was able to fill it out online, and that's the only thing from the state I've had to do. And then over the course of the campaign, there are certain, fundraising deadlines you see for a lot of the candidates we have the same. You have like a $1,600 limit for this level of campaign of contributions that you can take. I'm not taking contributions, but you can. $1,600 for the primary, $1,600 for the general. So for one person, they could give you up to $3,200 for your county commission run. And then there are certain deadlines that you have to submit financial disclosures for, how much is in the bank, how much you have received in contributions, how much you have made in expenditures, and certain other things, if you've given yourself a loan and things like that. And so at the end of January, at the end of February, there was one April something. We've got another one coming up June 30th, and then that one will be due to the Election Commission by July 11th, and there'll be one more right before the election, end of July or so, and you just have to keep track of that. So it's, I don't have a special Elect Todd Frommeyer committee. I just have, I'm Todd Frommeyer, so my signs say paid for by Todd Frommeyer, but some people do that. It helps you keep things separate. I set up a separate bank account where I keep the money. I've been giving myself the money because I'm trying to draw a distinction with the other candidates who take a lot of money.
You're not taking any money.
I am not making money. I'm spending my own money. I've had a couple of small donations, but that's it.
Are you doing that because you don't? It's kind of a platform.
Because money's the problem.
I don't want to be bought. I don't want to think that I'm running this.
It's not illegal. I mean, I want to make sure I'm not saying that taking those big checks from the developers.
No, it's very clear.
It's not illegal, but to me, it represents access, right? If you are trying to go out and get $500 checks from the various developers and business interests or people with money in Knox County or wherever, then those are the people you're talking to. Those are the people you have to go back to for re-election. They're the ones who have your phone number and your email, so they get their issues front and center with you a lot more than just the people that I see at the commission who want to come and complain about developers. I'm not taking that money. I'm trying to get myself out there as much as possible on social media because I want to be for the little guy, right? So I want everyone to have the same access to me. And if you've got my, all the postcards I send out, I have my cell phone, I have my email, I have my website. Call me, contact me, and people do. And that's what I want to do as commissioner. I think that's how it ought to be. Now, if I were running for any other level, I don't think I could just fund it out of my own pocket.
You would take that Senator $178,000 a year.
My wife would not probably be okay with us spending my money for any other race. But, District 4, it's one commissioner out of 11. It's not no money. And, I mean, we're fortunate that we can afford to spend the amount that I am. But, I mean, I couldn't do that at any other level. And
right.
I'm very stubborn independent. So when you asked, you said something earlier about whether I have a staff or not.
Right.
I'm different. My wife is my treasurer. She's also my unofficial campaign manager because I talk to her about stuff in bed at night before we go to sleep. I do my postcards myself. I deliver my signs myself. I do all of my paperwork myself. I don't think that's not typical. And maybe it's not even recommended. But that's how I'm choosing to do it because I'm trying to show that you can do this differently.
I think that's a fantastic way to do it. I don't see there's any I don't have any issues with that. I think it's I whether it's the realistic the real thing to me is that whether it is reality or not, the perception from others is that he took money, so the people that gave him money get first access to him. Whether it's true or not, the perception's there, and if nothing else, to at least avoid that perception.
The people giving the money think that's true.
Right, that too. And the question is whether the candidate agrees.
Yeah, and I think that's, we own a business, so and this is the problem I have with majority of politicians, and I was surprised when we talked to Ward about how much the county commissioners actually make a year. That really surprised me.
I actually don't know that number. Did he tell you?
Yeah, he said, what did he say?
1,700 a month, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not much.
And so it's not
it's
much.
Not nothing,
it's not nothing, but it's comparative to what other politicians make. And I've always said this, that we have too many politicians that go out there, and it's not about the job they do. It's about how they keep the job.
Right.
So those senators that want to make that, what did I say, $170,000?
You say it like twice a day. How do you not remember?
Well, the president makes $400. I don't know what the senators
exactly. 170 is senators, plus they get another $120,000 for. Anyway, that's the whole thing. But it seems like if I'm making this money and I want to keep my job, what do I need to do to keep that job? And so you try to keep the people happy, and it goes back to our politicians don't need to look at their position as a job. They need to look at it as a civil service. So it should not be about how much money they make, but I think that a lot of it. So I commend you for not taking all this extra money to run the campaign.
Well, I mean, I think to that point, you can look at it like 50 donors in the course of a campaign, and if they give you $500 or $1,000, you're getting a pretty good chunk of change. I could talk about Kyle's, but I don't need to talk about what Kyle's taken. But the guy that we're trying to replace, Hugh Nystrom, in 2016 raised about $76,000 over the course of his campaign and spent almost that amount. So, to my mind, be the commissioner and look out for all of the voters, and that will take care of itself, and you'll either get reelected or not. But I think if you're taking care of people, you will. Or you look at it and say, well, I can go to the same 50 people and get the big bucks, and then I'll have the signs to put up, and I'll have, the money to be able to let me run a big campaign and get the name recognition. And I just would rather help the small guy. Look, I'm 55, and it would be max two terms in this, right? 8 years, and one would be fine. I'm going to go in there, and we haven't talked about taxes, but I'm going to go in and say property taxes should go up because the way the taxes are screwed up. I went at the budget meeting this past Monday and did a public forum where I said and this is a little bit of in the weeds, but tax rate has gone from $3.32 per $100 of assessed value in 1999 to $2.12 because property values have gone up, and there's a thing called the certified tax rate law in Tennessee which says you can't get more revenue as a county by virtue of the fact that you're increasing property values through your property assessor. So our tax rate has gone down 120 cents over the last 20 years, and then the mayor presents his budget with a $4 million hole for schools, and I think schools ought to be the most important thing. It's the biggest, but it also ought to be the most important thing. And why can the commissioners not have the guts to say, why can't the tax rate go up to $2.14 rather than $2.12? According to the mayor's budget, 1 cent of property tax gives you $1.274 million. You could add $2.5 million to the budget and really help out the schools and raise it from $2.12 to $2.14. And the reason you can't is because the mayor made a political campaign pledge that he's not going to raise taxes. And I think he has tied one arm behind his back with that pledge so that he can't be an effective leader. This is what Knox County needs, in my opinion. And but I take that stand, and so I say that just to say, if I'm fortunate enough to win on August 6th, I mean, I'll be out there saying that. And I know someone who advocates for raising taxes might get a bullseye on his chest, and so at the end of 4 years I might get soundly defeated by someone who says no tax, this is the guy that raised your taxes. So,
and if you have a justifiable purpose behind it, it's a different thing than just being like, well, we just need more money. I mean, there's a focus goal behind why you want to raise the taxes, and I can at bare minimum respects that.
Raise taxes to whatever you want to stop bringing home fundraiser shit.
Well, and
whether it's candy bars,
you said that before.
Candles,
the
or
$1 million
popcorn.
the $1 million cut in the school's budget was for materials and supplies, and to my mind, that's extra money that goes to the schools so they can pay for things, and I think that means that there are going to have to be more fundraisers in a lot of schools because
every week you're going to get the email from the teacher that says we need wipes and we need
they give that shit out at the beginning of the year. Like, here's the list you have to bring to school. I pay fucking taxes. Why do I have to bring all this shit to school for my kid to start school? And then week into school, oh, we got a marathon. Pledge 2 cents a lap.
All right, so the last thing I want to do as part of the standalone interview is your thoughts on turning Knoxville Metro. Something that I'm very interested in how the process works, as well as I'm very interested on whether you think Knoxville is in a position to do so. I look at Knoxville and I don't see a city and a county. It's one place to me. Mm-hmm. And this whole premise of we operate as a city separately from a county, I don't know where your house is, but where we sit right now is that's city on the other side of that fence. This is county. 3 houses that way, city. And then 5 houses that way, city. I'm in this little island of county, which I did on purpose because I wanted to be in county. But your thoughts on if you think a metro for Knoxville is a good idea to dissolve, essentially it would be dissolve the city, I guess would be the normal way to do it. And then Knox County takes over the entire and becomes the only governing body over the county. We take the city as a separate government out, or is it something that you think with the way Knoxville sits, we need to stay separated so that the county people can have their kind of way they would like to do things versus the city way? That's the question. Your thoughts on that? This is, as far as I understand, this has not been discussed anywhere except in my head, and then I've got it out loud to people that might actually make a difference if they agree or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that about the fence and everything, because I was just looking at I was visiting with a supporter the other day, and he was talking about how he's both county and city, and so he had at some point in his history been a city council person, and then he's also been on county commission, and he can do that because he's both city and county. And then that caused me to want to go and look. If you go to KGIS, you can look at the map, and it's a mess. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's one house in this neighborhood that's been annexed. And it's in the middle of all, like, there's one property, and then there's a bunch of county, and then there's a bunch of city around that. It's madness. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I haven't studied this, so I don't know what the answer would be, and I would probably, if I'm going to give you the political answer, say that I would need to see the proposal. My thought is, though, I would be in favor of something which would make those lines more uniform.
Right.
I think the way they are and the way you describe them especially is crazy.
Right.
That's not the ideal way that
we
ought to have in the county or the city. But I just couldn't possibly even fathom at this point to come up with what would be the way to go forward. I mean, where would that even, would people want that? At the end of the day, I'm a Democrat. I'm for voting and democracy. I want people to have a say. So anything like that, I think, would have to, obviously go to the voters. And I would think before you could even propose something like that, we would need to see a groundswell of interest from either people in the city wanting to do that or people in the county wanting to do that.
But just think how much money you would save. One mayor.
Right.
Cut out a mayor.
One police department.
One police department.
Well,
One,
if the mayor's India Kincannon, okay. If the mayor's Glenn Jacobs,
Whoa.
not so much.
You don't.
Not a fan.
I'll call him and
Not
he'll
a fan.
body slam you.
Yeah, well, I've criticized him on Facebook quite a lot, and the comments to my posts about it usually end up with, well, why don't you go and challenge him to a match? And we would love to see that.
That's what you do, right?
Because
you got a problem with somebody, you body slam
He's a
him.
big guy. He's at the commission meetings all the time. I mean, he's a big guy. I just don't like his form of
I'm
leadership.
pretty sure I'm pretty sure in the legal post you win the battle. You might lose lose the battle, but you win on the other side when a giant slams your face in. But
The real question is, do you think there's a problem with having somebody have a ski boat and a fishing boat on their property?
this wasn't another.
That was in that one of the
Yeah,
podcasts.
Gina, he brought it up with Gina too.
I listened to that and it actually made me think because so I have an HOA in my neighborhood and I can't even have political yard signs. I can't have a boat in my driveway. It would have to be in the garage, which wouldn't fit if you've seen my garage. So I wouldn't be able to do that, but that's got nothing to do with the county or the city because that's an HOA thing. I support reasonable regulation from the county for things like that. I think the issue is, and I don't know if it was one of you guys or you were talking about somebody else's issue. I mean, is it a nuisance or is it not? And I think you can get people who will try and abuse what is, I think, a reasonable regulation because they're pissed at their neighbor and they just want them not to have two boats out there. And, a little bit of common sense would be good, but I don't.
I got 2.25 acres, so it's not like I have a small area. It's not like you drive up to my house and there's, my front lawn, there's
looks
shit
like a junkyard and it's all piled on top of it.
I've got a lot of property. Exactly.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to pander and say I would be in favor of overruling that regulation. I don't know it. I am in favor of reasonable regulations of those sorts, but each case is a little different.
No, and if you listen to the thing we talked about, and I said, I understand when there's a situation that affects somebody else's property. If you have a shithole house and it's affecting other people's property value, I completely understand that situation. But that's law, I don't understand.
We have a few reoccurring stories, and that's one of them. My rural metro story, which we don't need to go into. It always seems to come up when we have this kind of part of conversation as far as, I think that's where the genesis of the metro idea came from for me, because I've heard a couple rumors from Jacob's office and some other things pop up in the news about possibly having a county fire department, getting rid of rural metro, which the libertarians, I prefer a private, I don't want to pay taxes for a fire department. That's why one of the reasons I moved the county and stuff like that. And so, it's just kind of the ideas rolled around my head, and it's like, how does that work? Because you get like Nationals and stuff like that at some point it was its own municipality inside of Davidson County or whatever, mm-hmm. And then it's all now one metro area and it's all one government. And for a different direction on going in the tax conversation as earlier is, instead of adding 2 cents to the property tax, we can take 25 cents off by cutting down a bunch of redundant positions and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of, like you said, it would be a massive proposal on the specifics of how X, Y, and Z come down. And I can understand not really pushing an opinion one way or the other. I get the joy of being able to say whatever I want because it doesn't matter because I'm not running for office right now.
Not yet.
Not yet. But and it's 2020, so when I do run in 2026 or whatever,
and I will buy a house in your neighborhood and run against you.
That's fine.
Just to do it.
Bring it.
Where's your district at?
I will say that AC talks more like a lawyer than you. Like, we've got some few lawyer friends.
He's the lawyer, right?
No, he's not a lawyer.
You had a lawyer that you did an interview
right,
with.
Right, that was Jamie. He is a lawyer.
Right. He is a lawyer, but lawyers are typically like, you need to define that. Like, you ask him a question, like, you need to define the question I'm asking. I can't answer that question because you have not explained the full.
I can talk like a lawyer. I just there's a place and
we appreciate it.
All right, so let's shut it down here. Let's say you give out whatever contacts you'd like to give out. Yep. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, any way to find you, any way to support your candidacy, we are almost in agreement. Our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel if you want to get a hold of us. It is also almost in agreement at gmail.com. Todd?
Right. So my campaign website is toddfrommeyer.com, TODDFROMMEYER. You won't find a donate now button there, which differentiates me because I'm not trying to take donations. If you walk up to me on the street, I may take your $5 bill, but otherwise I'm trying to do it a little differently. I'm going to give my cell phone out. It's 865-850-1894. You should feel free to text or call me if you want to, and I'm trying to be as open and transparent in this process, and then if I'm fortunate enough to be elected on August 6th, I'm going to be the same way as commissioner. I want people to talk to me. I want to hear what people think. You know what my positions are, and so, at some point you're hearing my positions and deciding, is this a guy that I can support in the position or not? And I'm going to vote and act as a commissioner in that way, but also, I understand that I'm going to need to be responsive to what people want on a specific issue that might come before the commission. I want to help people with the commission as much as possible, so you should feel free to reach out to me at any time. Maybe not 3 o'clock in the morning if you're calling, but otherwise,
3:15.
Let me hear from you.
Well, Todd, we really, really appreciate you coming in. And I'll have this broken down, and we'll have this released tomorrow, the 28th of June. We thanks everybody for listening. Good night.
Bye-bye.